Hello, everybody. Apologize for the messy hair today. I need to get it cut. But today I'll be responding to Catherine's debate on how the U.S. was not justified in dropping the atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. So, one of the first points she makes was that the Japanese state itself was weak. And yes, to a certain point, I would agree that the Japanese state was weak in the fact that we did crush their navy and most of their air force during the Battle of Midway, and we sunk their large aircraft carrier. However, I don't think the Japanese state itself was weak to the point of surrendering before we dropped the atomic bombs, just because we had demanded their surrender multiple times. The Japanese had refused. They were very confident not only in themselves, but they had such respect and such honor to their traditions and to the glory of continuing to fight for one's country that the idea of surrender was not in the mind of the emperor or in his advisors. And I think because of that honor and that glory of fighting, I don't see a realistic way that we could have forced them to surrender without dropping the bombs. Um, Catherine brought up the point of retaliating back at Japan for Pearl Harbor using more traditional warfare. And while the US did have plans for the use of traditional warfare in the sense that we were going to use our Navy and our Marines to launch a full scale land invasion of mainland Japan, um, the strategy itself, the long term planning, and the actual outcome of that invasion was just too murky. Was too. Um, it was very hard for our military advisors and our commanders to see this invasion not only going excellent on our part, but also us ending it in a quick fashion. Truman was advised, whether these numbers were correct or not, we don't know, but he was advised that if we were to launch a mainland invasion of Japan, we would be expecting around 1 million US casualties, as well as the invasion force to take around 1 to 3 years to accomplish its goal. And just from the point of national morale, we've been in the World War since 1941, since the bombing of Pearl Harbor. It's been almost 5 years since then. We've been fighting the Japanese and the Nazis on both sides of the world. And I think to a certain point, the U.S. was confident that the Allies would win because we did beat the Germans. However, fighting for that long creates tiredness on the home front. I don't think America would have been able to continue fighting for another 2 or 3 years, especially if we were invading Japan. I think Truman and his military advisors realized there was no easy justification to give to the American people to continue us fighting in Japan, especially justifying us invading a foreign land and fighting on foreign soil against not only the remnants of the Japanese military, but also the civil militia that would have risen up against us. Um, just looking at all points, it didn't seem very realistic for the U.S. to even launch any kind of invasion. Just looking at Iwo Jima, it was one of the bloodiest fightings that we've seen in the Pacific Theater. That proved to us, and I believe Truman, that the Japanese were willing to die. They were all willing to die to protect their homeland. And I think at that point we realized it just was not realistic. She did bring up the point of the humanitarian perspective, and I agree, yeah, like to a certain extent, the use of atomic bombs is cruel, not only for the environment, but also for the civilians nearby. You know, we've destroyed their homes, we've killed innocent civilians who had nothing to do with the war. Um, the only problem, I guess, with that argument is the U.S. did give multiple warnings to Japan. We warned Hiroshima about this impending bombing that we would bring, the utter devastation of the weapon we would be dropping on Hiroshima. We gave as much warning as we could to the civilians nearby and Japan itself about the tactics we would be using, and yet nothing happened. There's only so much we can do and warn, the civilians before it's just out of our hands entirely. And lastly, she brought up the idea of us bombing Hiroshima and Nagasaki potentially being a terror attack by the United States. And I just don't see how we can justify it being a terrorist attack, especially when we've given the Japanese people so many warnings about our attack. Usually, terrorist attacks are out of the blue, no one's noticed, not a lot of intel. We gave as much as we could to help the Japanese people and warn them ahead of time. Um, and using the same logic, I would argue that the attack on Pearl Harbor was more of a terrorist attack. Um, our bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki were during military conflict when Japan was at war with us. Uh, the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor was out of the blue. The U.S. had not officially entered the World War yet. We were still at peacetime. I mean, we were selling weapons to Britain. However, we were not militarily active in the war itself. And for Japan to come out of the blue and attack us like that, I believe that is more of a terrorist attack than us on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Um, Thank you guys for hearing my side of the debate. Thank you, Catherine, for making some excellent points on her side. I really appreciate it. Good job. And yeah, thank you guys.